time out of your lunch hour. We're going to make the most of our time and jump into the credit card module. If you've been with Sage for a long time, you'll know that this is kind of a newer module in the latest versions. So I'm going to go over the different steps, and then I want to give you some real-world applications, you know, some best practices. I'll try not to lecture too much, but I would like to share with you a couple of tips from working in the system and with clients. So let's just jump right into it. The first thing that I want to walk through is going in and adding an issuer. What a name, that's what they call it. So as you can see, you can access the module here in what we call the tree. You can go up to the Activity Center, and if you add a shortcut, for example, I added this shortcut here. So if I wanted to add a shortcut, I can drag it over and add it there. And then I save. But I tend to use the tree and talk in numbers, so just have to, I guess, kind of get used to it because I'm old school and I'm used to just having the tree. So the first thing that we're going to do is add an issuer. So you have a new credit card and you need to set it up. And so this, you think about who you're going to pay. This is, you know, what company you're going to pay the bill to. So I'm going to click on Add. And first thing I have to do is pick the current liability general ledger account. What account do I want? So if I don't know, I can come here and take a look at what I've already got. So for example, you'll see I've already got American Express, Visa, and Chase Visa. Okay, so I need to have a number within this range, so I'm going to put in 2005 and kind of just follow on down. Now keep in mind as we go through the credit card module, the numbering, this one will always come up first because of the number, then this number, and so forth. So think about that when you're designing your numbers or assigning your numbers, because maybe this particular card that I'm putting in is going to be the most important card, but I can't put it any further up the ladder because, you know, there's already an account there. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this. So I'm going to put in number 2005 so it slots in right here. And because I put 2005, it's going to automatically create that in the 17 and give it sub-accounts because the card itself will be the sub-accounts. So here I'm going to put in MasterCard, and I'm also going to put that as the payee. So this is like the official payee name as it appears on the checks. And if you ever have a question of, you know, what it's looking for, always look down to your tips down here. You can put in an address. If you pay with a physical check. And I'm just, if you pay online, you really don't have to put this in. But I'll just put this in this time. And I want to hit save. And then it's going to say, well, okay, you've entered a card, an issuer. Do you want to enter some issuees? Well, yes, I do. So this is going to take me to the next module, 472, add or edit the credit cards. It's already set to MasterCard, and I'm going to add a card. So the first card number, I would recommend using the last 4 digits of the card. It's a great way to identify it. You can put in all the digits, but, you know, to me, the last 4 is fine. So let's say that this is the company card, you know, that sits in the drawer and everybody uses as they need it. Okay. And then I'm going to add another one, and it goes to the next number, of course, but let's say I want to put 9898. Now, as you know in Sage, if you put a 0 first, it will take that out. As you can see, it just discounts it. So if you see a 3-digit, you know, you may want to remember, oh, I've got a 0 first. So it's really up to you. Okay. And let's just say this is Big Spender. We all have one of those, right? Okay. So I've got the card, I've got the issuers, and I'm done with this module. Come in there, come in there. So I've done 471 and 472. Now I want to talk to you about the credit card receipts field. Okay, and as I open it up, you see what I was talking about earlier, defaults to the lowest number. So just keep that in mind. Don't forget to change that when you have multiples. Okay. Down in the grid, I took out part, alpha part, unit, location, serial number from here, and then I saved it. The reason I did that is because I rarely would use a part in this credit card receipt. If it has a part, there really should be a PO for it, and we'll kind of get into that later. So I just hid those screens, those columns, and saved it. Okay. So as we go through here, I want to talk about, before we enter a credit card receipt, I would like to talk about some of the defaults. For example, switch this to MasterCard because that's kind of what we're talking about. Do you see here under vendor, there's an asterisk there. Now, Sage Standard comes with, this is not a required field. So it becomes like that. And there's this little button that says help me decide and talks about if you want a vendor or don't want a vendor. I strongly recommend that you make this a required field and you require a vendor. Why do I say that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. If you don't put in a vendor and you pay out, let's just say, for example, a subcontractor, there's no vendor, the 1099 information is not going to be updated. So to me, that's very important. It's the same rule, just, you know, if you ever do a 1-1 check, if you don't put in a vendor, same rule as that. It's not going to update the 1099. Okay. The other reason is if you enter a credit card receipt without a vendor, it creates one transaction, and that's it. It basically expenses the account that you choose down here, and it creates a liability for the credit card. And then that liability is paid when you pay the credit card. But it can make it very difficult to find that transaction and void it if you need to redo it. And as you know, when you're processing AP, there's times you've got to void and re-enter. That's just life, and life in the AP lane. So I do recommend that you put in a vendor, and I want to show you an example of a transaction that does not have a vendor. And that one is 603. So here's an example. Like I said, here's where it was expensed, right? You expensed it, and then you created the liability. This comes from the credit card receipt module. Okay, so to go and find this amount would be, or find this transaction may be a little difficult because there's no vendor. You'd have to find it in your list of transactions. You'd have to either know, the number. You could go search for it, by amount over in the 2.5, but I still recommend that you have a vendor. This is an example of one with a vendor. Do you see how it hit the AP liability? And also the credit card. It basically moved the liability from the credit card from the AP. And so this is an example of, for this vendor, this $599, it has a vendor on it. You can actually see it creates a paid invoice. So everybody see that there? It creates a paid invoice under the vendor. So now I can find it. So if I drill down, and I'm one I like to drill down, and find stuff. So here's the invoice. Do you notice that it's paid? Okay. What if this is supposed to be $499? Can I void it from here? Well, no, because it's paid. As you know, when an AP invoice is paid, you can't void it. But I can come in here, and it says credit card, because that's how it was paid. Drill down. Now I'm finding the other side of it. This is that transaction we were just looking at, where it's the credit card receipt. If I void this, click, click, and now I got to move off the record to make sure the status changes. You can always close it and reopen it too. So either way, you can close it and then open it. Do you see how it went from open to paid? Now I can edit it, as you know how to edit transactions. So I just wanted to show you that, and of course it changed it. Got to change the cost record. because these are typical questions that I get from clients on the credit card module. So let's go back to the credit card receipt. And, you know, even though I can't hear you, I can hear everybody saying, well, I don't want to set up every ARCO, every in and out, every Circle K, every 7-Eleven. I understand that. So when you enter, you can enter a whole statement at a time. You can enter one, you know, each one individually. That is up to you. But if it's a vendor that you use all the time, go ahead and, you know, use that vendor. If it's a bunch of miscellaneous ones where you don't have a vendor, I actually set up a vendor called miscellaneous credit card. And really all it is miscellaneous credit card. Vendors are free. I marked it internal in my type, so I know it's internal. And I really didn't fill out any other information. That's my miscellaneous credit card. So that's really, you know, why I think you should have a vendor, because you can work around it. If you want to put in a bunch of transactions that doesn't tie to one vendor, you can at least put it here and go and find it. Okay. The other default that I'd like to talk about is the transaction number. When you're processing this, most time you really don't have that number. I mean, how many times do you get the actual slips and have this information? If you have it, great, put it in. It's a required field. I can't change it. It's required by Sage. It's a must-have. So instead of trying to, you know, I can't change it, so instead I'm in supervisor mode and I hit F7. I'm going to come here and put the default to transaction number. So it's going to default for me. It's going to have something in there. If I have it, I can always override it, but otherwise it's just going to say that. That to me means that there's no transaction. I just know. Or, you know, I could put in, you know, a code or whatever you want to do, and instead of transaction number, it could be, you know, nines, whatever that you want it to be. But I just think that makes it flow better when you're entering this, and it doesn't slow you down, because most people, when they don't have this, they end up putting in, you know, the date anyway. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to go over on the setup of the 473. So I'm going to start new, and let's talk about entry in the 473. I'm going to go to MasterCard. Oop. And let's go to Mr. Big Spender, just to be fun. Okay. So there are two ways that you can enter in expenses from your credit card. You can enter it in the credit card receipt. You can also go through AP and pay any open AP with a credit card. Why would you want to do this? Well, as you can see on this screen, there is no place for a PO. And it's kind of a hard and fast rule that if you buy job materials, you know, or anything money spent on a job, it really should have a PO or subcontract. You know, sometimes you don't have a PO if they run to Home Depot or something like that, or if somebody went to buy something, put it on their credit card, and they didn't tell you about it, you know how that goes. There's no PO. But in everyday process, there really should be a PO or subcontract. So if you enter that information in here, that PO will never be updated and it won't be closed, automatically closed. So I do recommend that you do go ahead and put anything with a PO or subcontract and run it through the AP module. Of course, it job costs. It would job cost on the credit card module as well, but when you go to pay it, let's go to vendor payments, go to pay vendor, and let's just use this one for example. Okay, I want to pay that one by credit card. Instead of check, I hit credit card, pay vendors, and then it's going to say, well, okay, which credit card would you like? Well, you know what, I'm going to use the MasterCard and the Big Spender. Here's the transaction number again. It's defaulted. Now this is what's going to show when you go to pay it, so you can use that, or again, you can use the date, or whatever you want. If you want to say vendor payment, whatever you want this to say, that is up to you. I'll just put in the date. And we're in the sample company. FY is why I'm going back to 2011. Because see here, it's got to match the posting period. Okay, so I'm going to post payment. Credit card posting is complete. So basically what that did, and I kind of showed this earlier, but I just want to talk about it again. It moved the liability from accounts payable, so it will no longer show up on your aging report, and it moved it to your liability count for your card. And of course, that will be decreased when you pay the bill. So just keep in mind and think about your company processes, and do we enter this, in AP, or do we enter this in a credit card receipt? I've seen both. I've seen it where companies will just run through everything through the AP, and then I've seen it kind of a mix where you do some in AP and some in here. So it works both ways. So I did want to show you that when I made that payment in the credit card module, you will see it. Let me go down to MasterCard. There's that payment I just did. See how it automatically shows up in the reconciliation. Same as, like your bank rec. You write a check, it shows up in the bank rec. This, you pay by credit card, shows up in your credit card reconciliation. Okay. And also on this vendor, you paid $179.36, and we go to paid invoices because now it's paid. If I look at that record, here's that invoice. It's now paid. And if you look at payments, you'll see that it says credit card. We'll say which credit card. This is an automatic default from Sage, but you can always drill down to it and see which credit card it was. You can see I drill down. I think it's a great feature. So you can see it there and really trace it back. Okay? Click out of here, click out of here. Okay? So now we're going to go back to credit card receipts. This is where you enter in everything. So you can enter everything in one by one. That's always an option. You can enter in, by vendor, by period. You can enter in a whole statement at one time. That's also an option. So I'm going to give that example. And I'm going to say this is July expenses. And I have the transaction number, put in the date. I'm going to leave the job blank, and you'll see why. So I'm going to give an example of they went to Home Depot, like I said, and he didn't get a PO. So I'm going to use the materials here. Okay, so that's the bucket or the account that I'm going to expense it to. Okay, going down the list of my statement, there was some entertainment. And so I picked the correct GL account for entertainment. And as you know, you can always look it up here. This just comes from years of working in the sample company. I kind of know some of the numbers. You can also say if you wanted equipment fuel. And so that's the equipment. If you have the equipment module, you'll understand what I'm doing there. And, this would also could be overhead if you don't have the equipment module. But wherever your fuel goes to. Okay. And let's say advertising. And that was for Yellow Pages. So you can imagine, just keep going down the list, and I'm going to put in one more job expense. You're like, why is she typing all of that out? You will see in a minute. Okay, so I've got 1425. That's my statement. So it's going to ask me to job cost what? It's going to ask me to job cost this. It's going to ask me to job cost this because of the account range. It's going to ask me to equipment cost this. I don't want to use automatic job cost, and I really can't because there's no job entered here, and I did that for a reason, because I'm going to split them up. So if I go up to costs, job costs, and I'm going to pull this down, and if you have the service module, you could put a work order in here, but in this example, I'm going to put in the job. This is why I typed out the job up above, was because then I had it for reference down here. Okay, and I also don't want the description to default to July expenses, because if you're running a job cost report, the project manager or supervisor is looking at it, they can't tell much from that. I know you have the cost code, but I really think the description, you know, should also reflect what it was. And then, of course, you would have your cost code, and you could split this $500 up, you know, into many cost codes as you want. In this case, I'm just going to put it to material. And then job tool 1, again, and you know, I could put Home Depot if I wanted to, for example. And let's just pick one. Okay, so you can see that my job cost total equals my ledger total. And I want to share something real quick. If I hit save, it's going to automatically save. If I hit the X, then it kind of returns me back to this screen. It's just a little tip. Now, I'm going to also have to equipment cost, because the minute I hit save, it's going to tell me I have to equipment cost. And it's going to have me equipment cost at $50 for that fuel. So here I picked the, for the forklift. Again, change the description, and then equipment cost it, and I always put it to 3. To me, that makes sense for equipment cost. And see, 50/50. Now, if I hit save, what's it going to do, everybody? It's going to automatically close and save this record. If I hit the X, it will go back to the screen. But you see, when I hit save, now it's going to save this record. So just keep that in mind when you're processing. And so for an example, you know, if I want to do one by one, I can certainly do that. Let's say cell phone purchase. I don't have that. There's no job because this is going to be overhead, and it's $600. And the account is defaulting from the vendor screen. That's the nice when you have your invoice default set up. It will default from the vendor screen. And there's no sub-account, otherwise it would have opened up. So this is an example of where you can do one-on-one, just one at a time. So here's that Philips Wireless, and you'll see that there's that paid invoice right there. Very transparent. Okay. So that's an example of entering credit card receipts. Now I'd like to move on to, there is an app, or there is a module in here for entering recurring charges. It's okay. I like it. The only thing I don't like about it is there's no vendor. You can't put a vendor on here. So it has to be very specific in order to use this. So for example, this one is on the American Express. Here's a card for a membership, and it's for $139. Well, if it's, you know, the same price or, you know, same account every month, you know, that might be okay because I know where to go look for it. I can always pull a 2-4 report to go look for this account. we're looking at 2.5 for this amount. Not that it has to be the same amount every time. But let's say, for example, this was in July. I'm going to save and recall for just a moment. And so now my period matches my date. So now I just come here and post just like you do in recurring payables. Thank you. And then when the next month comes around, I could even change the price. I can change the price if need be. This isn't locked in or anything. I can even change the account number if I wanted to. And I like to save and recall. You don't have to. You can go ahead and post, and then you can post this as well. So there's an example of, where you can use reoccurring charges. It just works the same as recurring payables in the 4.6 here. And you get reminders on the credit card just like you would recurring payables. When you log in and you're overdue on recurring payables, journals, receivables, credit cards, it's going to remind anybody in this group down here. So if you have this group assigned to your user ID, it will remind you if things are overdue. Okay. That was in the 7.2. Just in case you don't use that feature, it's a nice feature to use. So let's go into reconciling the credit card statements. Okay, so I'm going to pull up, let's go to our newest one, MasterCard, display items. So you can see here that big spender is the only one that spent money this month. The statement beginning balance is 0 because it's a new card. And you'll notice I didn't put in a statement cutoff date. You can if you want. That's totally up to you. You don't have to put this in. You can just hit display items. Works the same way in the bank rec. If you keep, the statement pretty clean, you don't really need to. So I just in the habit of hitting display items. Okay, so you'll see that here's a charge, here's a charge. And let's say that that's all that's on the statement this time. And you're like, yep, that's my statement total. Doesn't mean that's what you have to pay, though. Keep that in mind, but that is your statement ending balance. So I'm going to hit save. And this is just like the bank rec. You can trial it or you can final it. Either way, trial to go back and work on it. I'm not going to create a PDF, but always do that when you final it. So let me say that again. When you go to finalize it, always create a PDF. In this case, I'm not, just because I'm showing this to you, but always do a PDF. Did I say that enough times? Always take a copy of the PDF. Okay. Then it will ask you, would you like to make a payment on your credit card? Well, yes, I do. Now it brings up, do you see where this is what was reconciled? It wasn't the whole balance. It was just what was reconciled. So I can come in here, pick the card, and I have this defaulted. You don't have to. I just put in the general checking to have it defaulted. And the check number, well, actually, I'm going to pay it online. I don't need a check number, so I'm going to say online. If you actually need to print a check, what's the code for actually printing a check? Is the 4 zeros. Just like in the 1.1 screen. Works just the same way. Okay? So I better give it, let's say we're paying it in August. July MasterCard expenses. Whatever makes sense to you. Now, this is where I say, how much do I want to pay? I could pay this even though it's not reconciled. I could pay this, or I could even pay that. Maybe you don't want to pay it in full. And I'm going to save. And it doesn't like this. Give me 1 second. It's the same issue I had in the first meeting. I don't know why it doesn't like this 1,000. Hang on a second. Is it not the date that it doesn't like? I have it in period 8, 2011. This should not matter. I don't know why it doesn't like this cash account. Try it again. This time I think I paid it out of savings. Okay. Well, as you know, this can happen, so I'm just going to go right back into it. Make sure my period matches my date. Okay. As you know, you can always use the drop-down list. I tend to type faster than picking it out of a list, so just why I type it. Okay, and we want to pay $500. Yes. Okay. So that's all saved, ready to go. And when we come into reconcile credit card statement, come to MasterCard, display items, and you'll see that payment. So for the next time that you're going to do your credit card reconciliation, you always verify your beginning balance, and then you start verifying. You can either hit this or hit this. This unclears it or opens it, and this verifies it. And then this should be your ending balance, after you've entered everything for the next statement. But that's basically how the credit card statement works. Go here. Let me go here. Okay. But what I want to show you is, let's just go to the American Express, for example. Okay. There are times when somebody's getting close to their limit and you have to just, quickly go online and throw some money at the card. You don't have the receipts approved. They're not all together. But the person's getting close. I see this happen all the time. So they just need to pay money towards it. So you can come in here and say, just like we talked about, I can, pay $10,000 towards that. I'm not limited to this. As long as it shows up on the account and on the line item here, I can throw money at it, so to speak. There. So when you look at the American Express, it's going to look like you have, let's go here. See, there's those two payments, like a credit. But, you do. You have a credit on the liability there. So keep that in mind. Don't let it stop you from recording it, the payment in there, so that your checking account keeps up to date. So prepayment happens all the time. And it shows in your credit card statement. And, of course, then, it shows in your bank rec. And you can see it right there. Okay, so that's the credit card module in all its glory. It's really, you have to think about, what works best for your company, how you decide to use, the credit card receipts. In years of processing AP, I found it helpful to, reconcile the credit card statement every week or couple of weeks, because if I saw something on there I wasn't sure what the expense was for, I could go ask that person and they could remember it better than if I asked them, a month or a month and a half later, depending on how the credit card statement falls. So that's just why I found it helpful. I'd reconcile it that often. That is up to you. So you can enter it one by one or, as a whole chunk at one time. But again, I want to say again, I don't mean to harp on it, I really think that you should run job materials with the PO and the subcontract through the AP module and then just pay it with the credit card if that's how you're paying it. So that's it. I thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate you taking your time to learn about the credit card module.